Okay, scrolling on down, now that we have emphasized the importance of paragraph 4b, we have the first big change here in little Romanet I, and that is that offers of compensation won't be in the MLS anymore. So that change has been made to that Romanet. And then we have a little parenthetical here added saying, starts up here, buyer agrees the firm should be entitled to receive, the same in consideration for firm services, provided that any compensation paid by a cooperating listing firm or seller shall not exceed the amount of the fee being this part up here, right? See this quotation fee right here? That means whatever's in this blank is what is specifically defined as the fee throughout the rest of the agreement. So the firm can seek the fee from a cooperating listing firm or from the seller. Buyer agrees firm shall be entitled to receive the same, which is the fee, in consideration for firm services hereunder, provided that any compensation paid by the cooperating listing firm or seller should not exceed the amount of the fee. All right. Moving on to Romanet 2. Nothing too earth-shattering here. However, Forms Committee, even before the settlement changes came out, thought it was important to make this change here. Prior to making an offer, firm will inform buyer of the compensation offered. And I think this change really sort of underscores the fact that it's this kind of consideration and thinking from our Forms Committee that made the forms so compliant with the settlement even before the settlement came out. Making sure that it's important for the buyer to know prior to making the offer. Now, granted, that should have been done in the first place, sure, but this is taking the time, effort, and energy to make sure that it's actually in the form in black and white for the protection of the consumer. So, hats off to them for making this change even before the settlement came out, and for doing others throughout the history of the forms. Going down, this is a big change here in Romanet 3, so let's talk a little bit about this. If additional compensation, incentive, bonus, rebate, other valuable consideration being money, payment, fee, over and above the fee is offered to the firm, then the firm shall disclose it and obtain the buyer's consent. The language that you can see that's stricken through used to provide that the buyer automatically just agreed to that. Okay, that has been taken out, and that is because of the terms of the settlement requiring that if there's more compensation more than what the buyer's already agreed to, then the buyer has to agree to that by over and above by an amendment to the agency agreement. So this is a pretty big change, and again emphasizes the fact that you've got to make sure this blank is correct up here. You just have to. Could the buyer agree to amend this agency agreement? Yes. And we're going to talk about one way that they can do it today, but even without one form that we're not going to cover in this series anyway, is that you can just use the agency amendment form. It's already there in the forms library. So feel free to use that. If your buyer client is okay with amending your agency agreement so that you can get paid more money based on cooperative compensation that's offered, that is perfectly fine. The other option would be Form 770, which we're going to cover in just a little bit. All right. This here in yellow with the initial lines is a CYA that was added by the Forms Committee even before the settlement came out. Here you have 1, 2, and 3. The buyer understands, and the initial line is to make sure that it's very specific. That there's no questioning that the buyer somehow missed this. Okay, they have to initial this separately. Okay, buyer understands the firm services are not free, and that if the listing firm or seller agreed to pay the buyer's firm, the buyer agent firm, all or a portion of the fee, then a portion of the purchase price will be paid to a listing firm, who will in turn pay firm as a cooperating agent. Okay, so really what 2 is talking about is just making sure the buyer understands how the money flows. If they're paying, the purchase price, a portion that's going to the listing firm, and a portion of that coming back to the buyer agent, just explaining that to them in that process. And then finally, number 3, if the cooperating compensation offered is not sufficient to satisfy the fee, buyer is obligated to pay the difference. Now, mind you, this is already in there. Now, mind you, this is already in the contract. Okay, already in this buyer agency agreement. It's just making sure that the buyer understands that and having them specifically initial that. All right. Moving on down, this note's been changed slightly. Form 770 can be used to disclose potential additional compensation and obtain the buyer's consent. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. That'll be a very short edit, a very quick edit, very quick conversation. It's not that big of an edit in Form 770. Form 770 is a confirmation of compensation, so we'll get there in a little bit. All right, and then let's see. A technical edit here. I'm not going to cover it right now, other than if you look here, fully negotiable. As I said, talking about Form 101. Fully negotiable, part of any negotiation is the answer no. So if your client wants you to work for a certain fee that you're not agreeable to, then you do not have to. Okay. All right. Those are the big changes to Form 201, I believe. Yep. There we go. All right. And so moving on next, we'll go to Form 203.